The shoe looked like garbage, just a worn-out black sneaker lying beside a dumpster on a freezing November night. But when Linda crouched down and shined her phone light into that shoe, what she saw made time stop. A pair of eyes stared back at her, tiny, terrified, barely alive. What Linda didn't know in that moment was that this puppy had been waiting in that shoe for 3 days. 3 days without food, 3 days without water, 3 days of watching people walk past like she didn't exist. And what Linda definitely didn't know was that the next 72 hours would be a fight against odds so impossible that even she, a veterinary technician with 6 years of experience, wasn't sure she could win. This puppy's body temperature was already dropping into the danger zone. Her organs were beginning to shut down, and Linda had maybe 6 hours to reverse the damage before it became permanent. But before we get to that desperate first night, you need to understand who Linda was, because this rescue wasn't just about saving a puppy. It was about 2 broken souls finding each other in the darkest moment of their lives. If stories about animals who almost didn't make it matter to you, consider subscribing and stay with this one. 2 years before Linda found that shoe, she was a completely different person. She was the kind of vet tech who stayed late to bottle feed orphaned kittens, who cried happy tears when a critical patient went home healthy, who really believed that every life mattered and that trying was always worth it. And then her daughter died. Lily was 4 months old, healthy, perfect, no warning signs, no risk factors. Linda put her down for a nap on a Wednesday afternoon, and when she went to wake her 2 hours later, Lily was gone. SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. The medical examiner explained it to Linda in the hospital. It's not anyone's fault. There was nothing you could have done. Sometimes it just happens. But Linda's brain wouldn't accept that, because if it just happened, then that meant the universe was random and cruel, and your love couldn't protect the people you'd die for. And Linda couldn't live in a world that worked that way. So she blamed herself instead. She replayed that afternoon 10,000 times. If she'd checked on Lily 5 minutes earlier, if she'd put her down in a different position, if she'd somehow known, somehow sensed that something was wrong. The guilt consumed her marriage. Her husband Michael couldn't look at her without seeing the empty nursery. They divorced 8 months after Lily died, and Linda was alone. She went back to work at the county animal shelter because she didn't know what else to do. At first, she thought maybe saving animals would help. Maybe if she saved enough lives, it would balance out the one life she couldn't save. But it didn't work that way. After a year of trying and failing to feel anything except numbness, Linda stopped trying at all. She showed up to work, did her job with mechanical precision, went home to an empty apartment, took a sleeping pill, woke up, repeated. She stopped naming the animals she treated, stopped getting attached, stopped crying when they didn't make it, because caring hurt too much, and healing never came. Her coworker Jennifer tried to reach her. "Linda, you used to love this work. What happened?" Linda's answer was always the same. "I'm just tired." But she wasn't tired. She was hollowed out. She'd become so good at not feeling anything that she'd forgotten what feeling felt like. For 2 years, she existed in protective numbness until a freezing November night when a tiny puppy in a discarded shoe cracked those walls wide open. It was 6:47 p.m. when Linda cut through the Gas and Go parking lot. The sun had set an hour earlier, and the temperature had dropped to 26 degrees, well below freezing. Here's what most people don't know about puppies in cold. A puppy under 8 weeks old can't regulate their own body temperature. They depend entirely on their mother's warmth and their litter mates. When a young puppy is exposed to freezing temperatures, their body temperature drops fast. And once it falls below 95 degrees, they enter a medical emergency called hypothermia. At 95 degrees, they become lethargic. At 90 degrees, their heart rate slows dangerously. At 85 degrees, their organs start shutting down. Below 80 degrees, survival is unlikely even with emergency care. The puppy in that shoe had been there for 3 days. Linda didn't know that yet. All she knew was that she heard a sound, a whimper so soft it was almost swallowed by the wind. She stopped walking. Most people would have ignored it, would have assumed it was nothing, would have kept going because they were cold and tired and had their own problems. But something made Linda turn around. She walked toward the dumpster, pulled out her phone, and turned on the flashlight. The beam of light swept across trash bags and discarded fast food containers until it landed on a worn black sneaker lying on his side. And that's when she saw movement. Linda crouched down, her knees pressing against the cold asphalt, and angled the light into the shoe. A pair of eyes stared back. The puppy was so small she could fit entirely inside that shoe. Her fur was matted, brown and tan, caked with dirt and what looked like dried mud. Her body was trembling so violently that Linda could see it even from a foot away. But it was the puppy's eyes that broke something inside Linda. They weren't just scared, they were resigned, like this puppy had been waiting for help for so long that she'd almost stopped believing it would come. Almost, but not quite. Linda reached toward the shoe slowly, her hand shaking. "Hey, baby," she whispered. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The puppy didn't growl or snap. She didn't have the energy. She just watched Linda with those exhausted eyes. When Linda's fingers touched the puppy's body, her clinical training immediately kicked in, and what she felt made her stomach drop. The puppy was freezing, not just cold, freezing. Her body felt like ice beneath the matted fur. Linda pulled her hand back and did a quick visual assessment. Visible ribs, severe malnutrition, crusted eyes, infection, labored breathing, possible respiratory infection. No reaction to touch, extreme weakness, violent shivering, hypothermia. This wasn't a lost puppy waiting for her owner. This was an abandoned animal in critical condition. Linda looked around the parking lot. No one. No car with worried owners searching, just this tiny creature alone in the dark, slowly dying. And then Linda noticed something that made her blood run cold. Next to the shoe was an empty fast food container, a crumpled blanket, and a broken collar, the kind you'd buy at a dollar store. Someone was here. Someone had left these things. Someone had put this puppy in this shoe and walked away. This wasn't an accident. This was intentional abandonment. Here's the hard truth about animal abandonment. It happens more often than most people realize. Sometimes it's economic. People can't afford vet care or food. Sometimes it's circumstance. A puppy gets sick and the owner panics. Sometimes it's cruelty. But the result is always the same, a helpless animal left to die alone. Linda felt anger rise in her chest, the first real emotion she'd felt in months. How could someone do this? How could someone look at this tiny, defenseless creature and just leave her? But there was no time for anger. The puppy was dying. Linda could see it in the glazed look in her eyes, the way her breathing was becoming shallow. Linda gently scooped the puppy out of the shoe, and the little body barely reacted. She was too weak to struggle, too cold to do anything but exist. Linda unzipped her jacket and tucked the puppy inside, against her shirt, feeling that tiny, freezing body against her skin. The puppy's trembling intensified for a moment, probably from the sudden warmth, and then slowly began to ease. Linda stood up, cradling the puppy close, and walked quickly to her car. She started the engine and cranked the heat to maximum. Then she just sat there for a moment, feeling this impossibly small life breathing against her chest. And for the first time in 2 years, Linda felt her walls beginning to crack. She looked down at the puppy, this creature someone had literally thrown away like trash, and something shifted inside her. "You're not dying tonight," Linda said, her voice steady and certain. "I don't care what it takes. You're not dying." The puppy's eyes were half closed, but one tiny paw pressed against Linda's chest as if trying to hold on. Linda put the car in drive and headed toward the shelter, one hand on the wheel, the other holding the puppy against her heart. She kept talking the whole way, to the puppy, to herself, maybe to Lily. "Stay with me, baby. Just stay with me. We're almost there. I've got you. I've got you." But even as she said it, her clinical brain was running the numbers, and the numbers weren't good. The shelter was dark when Linda arrived at 7:03 p.m. Everyone had gone home hours ago. She unlocked the door with shaking hands and went straight to the medical room. The overhead lights flickered on, harsh and fluorescent. Linda laid the puppy gently on the examination table. Under the bright lights, the puppy looked even worse. Linda reached for the ear thermometer and carefully inserted it. The number that appeared made her heart sink. 89.3 degrees Fahrenheit. Critical hypothermia. The puppy's core temperature was more than 10 degrees below normal. Linda placed her stethoscope against the tiny chest. 70 beats per minute. Normal for a puppy this size should be 120 to 140. The puppy's heart was slowing down. Respiratory rate, shallow and irregular, 20 breaths per minute when it should be 30 to 40. The puppy was shutting down. Linda examined the puppy's teeth, barely visible baby teeth. Her eyes just starting to open fully. Her size, best estimate 3 to 4 weeks old, way too young to be away from her mother. Here's where most people make a fatal mistake. When you find a hypothermic animal, your instinct is to warm them up as fast as possible. But rapid rewarming could actually kill them by sending their body into shock. Linda set up a warming bed with a heating pad on low, not high. She wrapped the puppy in towels to trap body heat gradually. She raised the room temperature to 85 degrees, and she would monitor the temperature every 15 minutes. Linda gently pinched the skin on the puppy's neck. In a healthy, hydrated animal, the skin snaps back immediately. This puppy's skin stayed tented for 3 full seconds. Severe dehydration. But here's the problem. You can't give IV fluids to a hypothermic animal. Their blood vessels are constricted from the cold, and the fluids won't circulate properly. Linda had to wait until the puppy's temperature came up. Linda ran her hands carefully over every inch of the puppy's body, checking for injuries. No broken bones, no open wounds, but severe muscle wasting from malnutrition, eye infection with thick yellow discharge, possible ear infection, bad smell, dark residue, flea infestation. She could see them moving in the fur. Intestinal parasites likely given the distended belly despite emaciation. The puppy weighed 1.2 pounds. At 3 to 4 weeks old, she should have weighed at least 2.5 to 3 pounds. Linda did the math. This puppy had lost almost half her body weight. Linda stared at the puppy lying motionless on the warming bed, and her clinical training told her the truth she didn't want to hear. The ethical recommendation for an animal in this condition, hypothermic, severely malnourished, multiple infections, possible neurological damage from prolonged cold exposure, was humane euthanasia. The shelter didn't have the budget for intensive care. The puppy might not survive even with treatment, and if she did survive, there could be permanent damage. Linda had made this call dozens of times. It was the kind, merciful thing to do. She even prepared the medication, drew it into the syringe, felt it in her hand. But when she looked at the puppy, at those half-closed eyes, at the tiny chest still fighting to breathe, she couldn't do it. Because she saw something in that puppy that she recognized in herself. Someone who hadn't given up yet. Someone who was still fighting even though everything hurt and hope seemed impossible. Linda put the syringe down. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, we're doing this, but you have to help me. You have to fight." The puppy's eyes opened slightly, just for a second, and Linda could have sworn she understood. After 30 minutes under the warming lamp, the puppy's temperature had climbed to 92 degrees, still dangerously low, but rising. Linda knew she had to try feeding, but when an animal is starving, you can't just give them a full meal. Their digestive system has shut down to conserve energy. If you feed them too much too fast, it causes something called refeeding syndrome, a metabolic crisis that can cause heart failure, seizures, and death. The protocol requires patience. During the first hour, a small amount of electrolyte solution to stabilize blood sugar. During hours 2 through 4, very diluted puppy formula given slowly. Hours 5 through 8 gradually increase formula concentration. Over days 2 and 3, work up to full strength formula. Days 4 through 7, monitor constantly for complications. Linda prepared a diluted mixture, 1 part puppy formula to 3 parts water, warmed to body temperature. The puppy was too weak to nurse from a bottle, so Linda used a syringe. She placed 1 small drop of formula on the puppy's tongue and waited. Nothing. The puppy didn't swallow. Linda gently massaged the tiny throat, stimulating the swallow reflex. Finally, a small gulp. 1 drop at a time. Massage, wait, drop, massage, wait. It took 45 minutes to get half an ounce of formula into the puppy. Linda's hand cramped from holding the syringe so carefully. Her back ached from hunching over, but she didn't stop. When she finally finished, she placed the puppy back on the warming bed and watched that tiny belly rise and fall with each breath. Then she set an alarm on her phone for 2 hours, next feeding. Linda pulled a chair next to the warming bed and sat down. She was exhausted. She should go home, get some sleep, but she couldn't make herself leave. What if the puppy stopped breathing? What if her temperature dropped again? What if she needed something and Linda wasn't there? The questions spiraled in Linda's mind, and suddenly she was back in Lily's nursery 2 years ago, sitting in the rocking chair at 3 a.m., watching her daughter sleep, terrified to look away because what if Linda's breath caught? She hadn't let herself think about Lily in months. She'd locked those memories away because they hurt too much. But sitting here, watching this tiny creature fight to survive, all those memories came flooding back. Lily's weight in her arms, the sound of her breathing, the way she'd curl her tiny fingers around Linda's thumb, the overwhelming, terrifying love of being responsible for something so small and so fragile. Linda reached out and placed 1 finger against the puppy's chest, feeling the rapid heartbeat beneath the matted fur. "I couldn't save her," Linda whispered to the empty room. "I couldn't save my daughter, but maybe I can save you." A tear rolled down Linda's cheek, the first tear she'd cried in 2 years. And then another, and then she was sobbing, huge, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep and buried, all the grief she'd been holding, all the guilt, all the unbearable weight of loving something and losing it anyway. The puppy's eyes opened slightly at the sound. She looked at Linda with those exhausted, knowing eyes. And then something happened that Linda would never forget. The puppy lifted 1 tiny paw and placed it against Linda's hand. Not pulling away, not scared, just reaching. Linda looked at that small paw resting against her skin and understood. This puppy was asking her to stay, asking her to try, asking her to hope, even though hope was terrifying. "Okay," Linda whispered through her tears. "Okay, baby, I'm staying. I'm not leaving you." She gently wrapped her fingers around that tiny paw and held on. At 11:47 p.m., during the 3rd feeding, everything went wrong. Linda was carefully giving the puppy formula, drop by drop, massage, wait, when suddenly the puppy's body went rigid. Her legs shot out straight, her head tilted back at an unnatural angle, her eyes rolled back. Seizure. Linda had seen this before in critical patients, when the body's been without proper nutrition for too long, when the organs start failing, when the brain isn't getting enough oxygen, seizures happen. But knowing what was happening didn't make it less terrifying. Linda immediately laid the puppy on her side to keep her airway clear. She checked the clock, 11:47 p.m. She needed to time the seizure. If it lasted more than 5 minutes, it could cause permanent brain damage. The puppy's tiny body convulsed. Her legs paddled at the air. A small amount of foam appeared at her mouth. Linda's hands shook as she monitored the puppy's breathing, making sure she wasn't choking. 30 seconds, still seizing. 1 minute, Linda's heart was pounding. 90 seconds, come on, baby, come back to me. 2 minutes, the convulsions were slowing. 2 minutes, 30 seconds, the rigidity eased. 3 minutes, the puppy went limp. The seizure stopped. Linda checked for breathing, shallow but present, heart rate elevated but steady. The puppy was alive, but now completely unconscious. Linda knew what the seizure meant. The puppy's organs were failing. Despite the warming, despite the fluids, despite everything Linda had done, the damage from 3 days of exposure and starvation was too severe. The protocol in this situation was clear: humane euthanasia. The seizures would only get worse. The puppy was suffering. Linda prepared the medication again. This time, she filled the syringe completely. She calculated the dose based on the puppy's weight. She sterilized the injection site on the tiny front leg. She held the syringe in one hand and placed her other hand on the puppy's chest, feeling that faint heartbeat. All she had to do was inject. 3 seconds, and it would be over. The puppy would slip away peacefully. No more suffering. No more fighting. It was the merciful choice. Linda's finger rested on the plunger. And then the puppy opened her eyes. Not all the way, just barely, but those eyes found Linda's face, and the puppy made a sound, not quite a whimper, not quite a cry, just a soft exhale that sounded like, "Please." Linda froze. She stared at this tiny creature who'd been abandoned in a shoe, left to freeze to death, who'd somehow survived 3 days alone, who'd just had a seizure that should have killed her, and who was still impossibly holding on. "You're not ready to give up, are you?" Linda whispered. The puppy blinked once. Linda put the syringe down. "Okay," she said, her voice breaking. "Okay, we're not giving up. Not yet." She reached for her phone and dialed the emergency vet hospital 2 hours away. The call connected on the second ring. "County Emergency Vet, this is Dr. Amy." "Hi, this is Linda from County Animal Shelter. I have a critical patient, approximately 4-week-old puppy, severe hypothermia and malnutrition, just had a 3-minute seizure. I need to know if you can take her." There was a pause. "What's her current status?" "Temperature 94 degrees and rising, heart rate elevated but steady. She's post-ictal but responsive. I've been giving diluted formula and warming gradually." Another pause, longer this time. "Linda, I'm going to be honest with you. A puppy in that condition, the prognosis isn't good. Even if we can stabilize her, there's likely permanent damage, and the cost for intensive care would be—" "I know," Linda interrupted. "I know the odds. I know the cost. But she's still fighting, and I need to know if you'll help me fight for her." Dr. Amy was quiet for a moment. Then, "Bring her in. I'll prep the ICU." Linda felt tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Thank you. I'll be there in 2 hours." She hung up and looked at the puppy, who was watching her with half-closed eyes. "Hear that, baby? We're going on a road trip. You just have to hold on a little longer." Linda gathered supplies, heating pads, blankets, formula, syringes. She wrapped the puppy in layers of warm towels and placed her in a carrier with the heating pad underneath, set to low. At 12:15 a.m., Linda loaded everything into her car and started the 2-hour drive to the emergency vet. The whole way there, she talked to the puppy about Lily, about how loving something doesn't guarantee you won't lose it, about trying matters even when you're scared, about how hope isn't foolish, it's brave. And somewhere during that long, dark drive, Linda realized something. She wasn't just fighting for the puppy anymore. She was fighting for herself. Linda arrived at County Emergency Vet at 2:23 a.m. Dr. Amy was waiting at the entrance, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. She took one look at the puppy and said, "Let's get her to ICU." The next 3 hours were a blur of medical intervention. IV catheter placed in the puppy's front leg, warmed fluids running continuously, oxygen supplementation, anti-seizure medication, antibiotics for the infections, blood work to check organ function. At 5:30 a.m., Dr. Amy came to the waiting room where Linda had been sitting, staring at the wall. "She's stable," Dr. Amy said, and Linda felt something unknot in her chest. "But Linda, we need to talk about what comes next." They went to Dr. Amy's office. The doctor pulled up the puppy's chart on her computer. The blood work shows kidney damage, likely from the prolonged dehydration and hypothermia. Her liver values are elevated. She has a severe bacterial infection in both eyes, her ears, and probably her respiratory system. The seizures suggest possible neurological damage. Linda nodded. She'd expected all of this. With intensive care, and I mean round-the-clock monitoring, medications, possible feeding tube, she might recover. But might is a strong word here. I'd put her chances at maybe 40%. And recovery doesn't mean she'll be completely healthy. She could have lasting neurological issues, kidney problems, developmental delays. "What's the alternative?" Linda asked, even though she knew. "We could make her comfortable and let her go peacefully. No more suffering, no more fighting." Linda looked through the window into the ICU, where the puppy was lying in an incubator connected to wires and tubes, her tiny chest rising and falling. "What's the cost?" Linda asked, "for the intensive care?" Dr. Amy hesitated. "For 72 hours of ICU care, medications, monitoring, we're looking at $3,000 to $5,000, and that's just the first 3 days." Linda did the mental math. Her savings account had $1,200. Her rent was due in 5 days, another $1,100. She had 2 credit cards with maybe $2,000 total available. It wasn't enough. "And if she makes it past 72 hours?" Linda asked. "Then we reassess, but you're looking at ongoing medical expenses, special food, medications, follow-up appointments, possibly thousands more." Linda sat in silence for a long moment. The rational choice was obvious. She couldn't afford this. The puppy might not even survive, and even if she did, she might have permanent health issues that would require expensive, lifelong care. Linda should walk away, should let the puppy go peacefully, should protect herself from more heartbreak. But then Linda thought about the shoe, about those 3 days the puppy spent waiting for someone to care, about how the puppy could have given up but didn't, about that tiny paw reaching for Linda's hand. And she thought about Lily, about how Linda would have given everything, her savings, her house, her own life, for even a 40% chance to save her daughter. She looked at Dr. Amy and said, "I'll find the money, do whatever it takes." Dr. Amy studied her for a moment. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "Okay," Dr. Amy stood. "I'll start the treatment protocol. We'll monitor her closely and keep you updated every few hours." Linda nodded. "Can I see her just for a minute?" They walked to the ICU. The puppy was in a small incubator surrounded by equipment that beeped and hummed. She looked impossibly tiny in there, hooked up to IV lines and monitors. Linda placed her hand against the incubator's clear wall, right next to where the puppy's small body lay. "You keep fighting, okay? I'm not giving up on you, so don't you give up either." The puppy's eyes were closed, but her tiny chest rose and fell steadily. Linda stayed there for another 10 minutes, just watching her breathe. Then she left to figure out how to pay for a miracle. The next 72 hours were the longest of Linda's life. She went home to shower and change clothes, but she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the puppy seizing or lying cold in that shoe or looking up at her with those pleading eyes. She called the bank, maxed out both credit cards, called her ex-husband Michael and asked for a loan, a humiliating conversation that ended with him saying, "Linda, you can't save every stray animal. You have to let this go." She called her sister Emma, who wired her $1,000 without asking questions. She picked up extra shifts at the shelter, even though she was exhausted, even though every minute away from the hospital felt like betrayal. Dr. Amy called every 6 hours with updates. Hour 12, she's holding steady, no more seizures, temperature normal, but she's still not eating on her own. Hour 24, kidney values are improving slightly. That's a good sign, but the infection is aggressive. We had to increase the antibiotics. Hour 36, she had another small seizure this morning. We adjusted her medication. Linda, I need you to prepare yourself. The next 24 hours are critical. Hour 48, she's fighting. I'll give her that. Her temperature regulation is better. She's starting to respond to stimuli, but she's not out of the woods yet. Hour 60, Linda, I think you should come in now. Linda's heart dropped when she got that call. She drove to the hospital doing 80 miles an hour, her hands shaking on the wheel, her mind racing through worst-case scenarios. When she arrived, Dr. Amy was waiting at the entrance. Linda couldn't read her expression. "Is she—" "Come with me," Dr. Amy said. They walked to the ICU. Linda's legs felt like lead. This was it. This was the moment Dr. Amy would tell her the puppy didn't make it, that all the money, all the fighting, all the hope was for nothing. But when they reached the incubator, Dr. Amy smiled. "Look!" Linda looked through the clear wall of the incubator. The puppy was awake, not just awake, alert. Her eyes were clear for the first time. The discharge was gone, and she was eating, actually eating from a small bottle that a vet tech was holding. Linda's knees went weak. She's going to make it, Dr. Amy said quietly. She's not completely out of danger yet, but she turned the corner. Her kidney values are almost normal. The infection is responding to treatment. She's eating on her own. Linda, she's going to make it. Linda pressed both hands against the incubator and started crying, not sad tears this time, relief, joy, overwhelming, impossible joy. The puppy finished eating, and the vet tech placed her back on the warming pad. The puppy's eyes found Linda through the clear wall, and Linda could have sworn the puppy recognized her. "Can I hold her?" Linda asked. Dr. Amy hesitated, then nodded. "Just for a few minutes, and be very gentle." The vet tech carefully lifted the puppy out of the incubator and placed her in Linda's arms. The puppy was so light, so fragile, but when Linda held her against her chest, the puppy made a small sound, not distress, but contentment, and pressed her tiny head against Linda's heart. Linda stood there, holding this creature she'd found in a shoe 4 days ago, and felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Hope. Over the next 3 weeks, the puppy transformed. Linda visited her every day, watched her grow stronger, watched the light come back into her eyes, watched her start to play with toys, watched her tail wag for the first time. The infections cleared, the kidney values returned to normal, the seizures stopped. Against all odds, there appeared to be no permanent neurological damage. Dr. Amy was amazed. "I've been practicing for 30 years, and I've never seen a puppy in that condition make a full recovery. She's a fighter." Linda knew that. She'd known it from the moment she saw the puppy in that shoe, still holding on even though she had every reason to give up. On day 21, Dr. Amy gave the clearance Linda had been waiting for. "She can go home with you today." Linda had prepared everything: a soft bed, puppy food, toys, a collar with a tiny bell. When she carried the puppy out of the hospital in a small carrier, the puppy looked up at her with clear, bright eyes and wagged her tail. Linda took her home to the apartment that had felt like a tomb for 2 years. But with the puppy there, curled up in her bed, making small snoring sounds, occasionally waking up to check that Linda was still nearby, the apartment felt different. It felt like home again. Linda named her Hope because that's what she was. That's what she'd given Linda. Hope that love could survive loss. Hope that trying mattered even when the odds were impossible. Hope that broken things could heal if you were patient enough, brave enough to let them. 6 months after Linda found Hope in that shoe, they were inseparable. Hope had grown into a beautiful dog, about 15 pounds now, with soft brown and tan fur. They gleamed with health. Her eyes were bright and curious. Her tail never stopped wagging. She loved people, loved other dogs, loved life with the enthusiasm of someone who'd almost lost it. Linda had changed, too. She'd started therapy, finally dealing with Lily's death instead of running from it. She learned that grief doesn't mean you failed, it means you loved. And love, real love, is always worth the risk of loss. She was still of that tech, but she approached her work differently now. She got attached. She cried when she lost patience, but she also celebrated the wins. She stayed late for the difficult cases. She fought for the animals everyone else had given up on. Because hope had taught her that giving up is easy. Hoping is hard, but hoping is what makes us human. One Saturday morning, Linda took Hope to the park. Hope ran through the grass, chasing a tennis ball, her whole body wiggling with joy. A woman approached Linda. "She's beautiful. What's her name?" "Hope," Linda said. "That's a perfect name. How old is she?" Linda thought about that shoe, about the freezing night, about the seizures in the ICU and the impossible odds. "She's 6 months old. I found her when she was about a month old, abandoned and nearly frozen to death. The vets didn't think she'd survive, but she did." The woman smiled. "You saved her life." Linda looked at Hope, who'd brought the tennis ball back at Linda's feet, tail wagging expectantly. "Actually," Linda said quietly, "she saved mine." That night, Linda did something she hadn't been able to do in 2 years. She went into the room that used to be Lily's nursery, the room she'd kept locked since the divorce. She sat in the rocking chair with Hope curled in her lap and looked at the photos still on the wall. Lily as a newborn, Lily smiling, Lily reaching for the camera with tiny, perfect hands. Linda felt the familiar ache in her chest, the grief that would never completely go away, but this time it didn't crush her, because she'd learned something from Hope. You can survive the unsurvivable. You can love again after loss. You can find light in the darkest places. You just have to be brave enough to try. "I miss you, baby girl," Linda whispered to Lily's photo. "I always miss you, but I'm okay now. I'm finally okay." Hope looked up at Linda with those knowing eyes, the eyes that looked at her from inside a shoe 6 months ago and asked her to hope. And Linda did. This story doesn't end with Hope. Though she lives a long and joyful life as Linda's constant companion, it ends with the 12 other animals Linda fostered over the next year. Some lived, some didn't. Linda cried every time she lost one, but she also showed up for every single one of them, because Hope had taught her that showing up matters, even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. It ends with Linda starting a small rescue fund called Hope's Fund that helps other people pay for emergency vet care when they can't afford it, because she remembered what it felt like to choose between saving a life and paying rent. It ends with Linda finally spreading Lily's ashes in the memorial garden behind the shelter, letting go of the guilt she'd carried for 2 years, keeping only the love. But mostly, it ends with Hope, curled up on Linda's bed every night, following Linda to work every morning, greeting her with pure, unbridled joy every time Linda comes home. A reminder that love isn't about guarantees. It's about showing up, about trying, about choosing hope even when hope seems impossible. Because sometimes the smallest lives teach us the biggest lessons, and sometimes the thing you save ends up saving you right back. Not every animal gets a second chance. Subscribing helps make sure these stories don't end in silence.